Master Mason Reed had both hands wrapped around the lead. His boots dug so deep into the red dirt that the heels nearly disappeared. The Belgian Malinois at the other end did not look like an animal in training. He looked like a force of nature. Rex launched forward again, powerful enough to drag Reed half a step, despite the trainer's size and experience. The metal basket muzzle struck the restraint ring with a hard, hollow crack that echoed across the training grounds at Fort Bragg. The sound cut through the chatter of children, the rustle of flags, and the low conversations of veterans seated in the bleachers. Rex was 4 years old, lean, fast, built for precision. Yet there was nothing precise about the panic burning in his eyes. His gaze swept the perimeter over and over, never settling. He tracked every movement in the crowd, every distant sound, every shift in the wind. It was the same look combat veterans knew too well. A nervous system that still believed danger was everywhere. Reed lifted the microphone. "This dog has completed every available rehabilitation program." Rex lunged again, claws tearing furrows in the dirt. The trainer tightened his grip. He served with a Joint Special Operations Unit overseas. During that deployment, he detected explosives, protected his team, and helped save lives. Reed paused. But after returning to the United States, his behavior changed. The crowd grew quiet. Over the past 8 months, Rex has injured 3 experienced handlers. A woman in the front row shifted her young daughter closer. One handler suffered permanent damage to his left hand. Several veterans exchanged the kind of look that needed no explanation. They understood what happened when the body came home, but the mind did not. Reed continued, "We have tried medication, conditioning, environmental therapy, and trauma-based retraining." Rex threw his weight against the lead again, snarling behind the muzzle. "Nothing has worked." Reed drew a breath and let the words settle. "This is Rex's final evaluation." No one moved. "If we cannot establish safe control today, he will be euthanized at 5 o'clock. The sentence hung over the field like a storm cloud. Rex stood trembling, chest heaving, ears twitching toward sounds no one else noticed. Children fell silent. A retired sergeant in the top row removed his cap and held it in both hands. The dog was not vicious. Anyone who had lived with trauma could see it. He was trapped in a mission that had never ended. Then, near the back of the bleachers, a man rose slowly from his seat. At first, few people paid attention. He looked like someone the world had forgotten. His jacket was sun-faded and torn at the cuffs. His beard was uneven. His boots were patched with silver duct tape. His frame was thin, as if several hard winters had taken more from him than food alone. But when he lifted his head, something changed. His eyes sharpened with sudden clarity. He was no longer staring past the world. He was fully present, and he was looking only at Rex. Without a word, he stepped over the rail. Boots hit the gravel below. A few heads turned. Reed was still speaking, but the man did not seem to hear him. He crossed the open space between the bleachers and the fence with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked toward danger before. Then he swung one leg over the barrier and entered the training field. The crowd inhaled as one. No one knew his name. No one understood why the dog's frantic movements began to slow. The stranger took another step. Rex lifted his head. His ears rose. The tension in the leash eased for the first time all afternoon. And then the dog stopped pulling. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan Walker lay awake beneath the Franklin Street overpass, while rain pounded the city above him. Water dripped through cracks in the concrete and splashed onto the pavement in steady rhythms. Wind pushed cold mist into the narrow space where he had built a temporary shelter from cardboard, 2 old blankets, and a blue tarp with a tear running through one corner. Traffic rumbled overhead. Headlights flickered across the darkness. Ethan drew his backpack closer and rested one hand on it. The pack held almost everything he owned, though "owned" felt like too strong a word. Most of it had been found repaired or carried forward from another life. A change of clothes, a canteen, prescription bottles with labels long faded, a flashlight that only worked if he hit it twice, and 3 items he protected more carefully than the rest. The first was a thick canine training guide with a cracked black cover. Several pages were marked with notes in his handwriting. The corners were worn smooth from years of use. The second was a photograph. In it, a younger Ethan stood in desert camouflage beside a black German shepherd named Shadow. Ethan's arm rested across the dog's shoulders. Shadow sat tall, ears forward, eyes alert. Both of them looked as though they belonged exactly where they were. The third item was a small silver whistle attached to a frayed cord. It was designed to emit a frequency too high for human hearing. To most people, it looked insignificant. To Ethan, it carried the weight of memory. Across from him, Luis Mendoza sat on an overturned milk crate, rubbing warmth into his hands. Luis was 63, a former Army medic with bad knees and a habit of finding humor where other people found despair. "You asleep?" Luis asked. Ethan kept his eyes on the rain. "No," Luis nodded. "Good, because I've got an idea." Ethan gave no response. That was normal. Luis had learned that silence did not always mean disinterest. Sometimes it simply meant Ethan was deciding whether speaking was worth the effort. "There's a military event tomorrow at Fort Bragg," Luis said. "K9 demonstration. Veterans getting free." Still nothing. Luis leaned forward. "And they're serving lunch." That got a reaction. Not much, just a slight turn of the head. Luis smiled. "Exactly." For several seconds, the only sound was rain striking concrete. Then Luis said more quietly, "You should go." Ethan shook his head. "Why?" Luis shrugged. "Because you still sit with that training book every night." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean anything." Luis looked at the backpack. "It means some part of you never let go." Ethan stared at the puddles forming near the curb. Some truths were harder to face than hunger. Luis rested his elbows on his knees. "Come with me, eat a decent meal. Watch some dogs work." Ethan said nothing. Luis hesitated, then spoke the one word he rarely used. "Ghost." Ethan flinched as if struck. The name had once followed him across training yards, deployment zones, and classified briefings. Ghost. The handler they called when a dog stopped trusting people. The Marine who could calm animals everyone else labeled hopeless. No one had called him that since the day he disappeared from his own life. Luis held his gaze. That man didn't vanish. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and worn. He should have. Luis let the words pass without argument. Rainwater rolled off the edge of the overpass in silver sheets. A police siren sounded somewhere downtown, then faded into the night. Ethan unzipped the backpack and pulled out the photograph. Shadow, the dog who had trusted him without hesitation. The partner who had followed him into places neither of them should have survived. Ethan traced the edge of the photo with his thumb. For years he had lived by a simple rule: keep moving, keep quiet, expect nothing. He avoided veterans organizations, ignored caseworkers, turned down offers of help. It was easier to sleep under concrete than to face the belief that he no longer deserved purpose. But hunger had a way of weakening old convictions. And curiosity, though small, had begun to stir. What kind of dog required a public demonstration? What kind of pain made an animal impossible to reach? Luis stretched his legs. "I'll catch the number 12 bus at 8. He settled deeper into his blanket. "If you show up, good. If not, I'll bring you a dinner roll." Within minutes, Luis was snoring softly. Ethan remained awake. He turned the whistle over in his hand, cold metal against his palm. A tool from a life he had buried but never truly abandoned. Above him, rain drummed on the overpass like distant rotor blades. He closed his eyes, but sleep did not come quickly. Instead, for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine something he had long considered dangerous. Not redemption, not forgiveness. Just the possibility that tomorrow might ask something of him. By 8 the next morning, Ethan was standing at the bus stop with his backpack over one shoulder and his hands buried deep in the pockets of his torn jacket. Luis saw him from half a block away and smiled but said nothing about it. Some victories were too fragile to name. The ride to Fort Bragg took nearly 40 minutes. Ethan sat beside the window watching pawn shops, gas stations, fast food signs, and quiet neighborhoods slide past in the gray morning light. Every few minutes, his fingers moved to the strap of his backpack, checking that it was still there. Luis noticed. "You know," he said, "most people bring a jacket to these things. You brought a whole past." Ethan did not answer, but his hand stopped moving. At the veteran entrance, a young security officer looked over their discharge papers. He checked Luis's first, then Ethan's. His eyes lingered on Ethan's name for half a second, but not long enough to recognize anything. "Go ahead," the officer said. Just like that, Ethan was back on a military base. The smell hit him before the memories did. Diesel fuel, fresh-cut grass, hot pavement, weapon oil from somewhere nearby. The scents were ordinary to everyone else, but to Ethan, they arrived like voices from another room. His shoulders tightened. His eyes moved to the rooftops, the fence line, the parked vehicles. He counted exits without meaning to. Luis touched his elbow lightly. Hey, you're here for lunch, remember? Ethan nodded once, though his breathing had already changed. They followed a line of veterans toward the outdoor training field. Some wore old unit caps. Some walked with canes. Some joked loudly, trying to make the morning feel normal. Ethan stayed at the edge of the group, close enough to belong on paper, far enough to disappear if he needed to. Near the bleachers, volunteers in bright blue vests handed out trays of food: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, corn, a dinner roll wrapped in plastic. Ethan accepted the tray with both hands and carried it carefully, as if sudden movement might cause it to vanish. He and Luis found seats halfway up the bleachers, away from the families but not too far from the exit. Ethan placed the tray on his lap. For a moment he only stared at it, then he began to eat, deliberately, not with enjoyment exactly, but with discipline. Small bite, chew, swallow, pause, repeat. That was how a man ate, when food had become strategy instead of comfort. When the body had learned not to trust full plates. When a warm meal felt less like kindness and more like something borrowed. Around him, families were settling in. Children pointed toward the training field. A little boy with a toy soldier in one hand asked his father if the dogs were heroes. His father smiled and said yes. Ethan looked down at his tray. Heroes. The word had a clean sound when children said it. Adults knew it was messier than that. A teenage girl in the row below laughed as her mother fixed her ponytail. A young Marine kissed his wife on the forehead before joining other service members near the field. An older couple shared coffee from a paper cup. The scene was peaceful. Normal. That made it harder. Ethan felt as though he were watching life from the wrong side of glass. Everyone else seemed to know how to sit in daylight, how to talk, how to belong to a morning, without preparing for it to turn dangerous. Luis leaned toward him. You okay? Ethan kept his eyes forward. No. Luis nodded. At the center of the field, a man in a clean uniform stepped onto a small platform. He had the posture of someone used to being obeyed. Straight back, controlled gestures. A voice that carried before the microphone even caught it. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, thank you for joining us today. The crowd quieted. I'm Master Sergeant Mason Reed, lead instructor for the Military Working Dog Rehabilitation Unit here at Fort Bragg. A polite round of applause followed. Reed waited for it to fade. He looked comfortable in front of people. Confident, polished, prepared. His uniform was sharp enough to make Ethan suddenly aware of every stain on his own jacket. Most demonstrations show what these dogs can do at their best, Reed said. Today we're going to begin with something more difficult. The tone of the crowd shifted. Reed folded one hand behind his back. Military canines are not ordinary animals. They work under pressure most people will never understand. They detect explosives. They search buildings. They protect handlers. They make decisions in seconds that can save entire units. Ethan stopped chewing. But when a dog comes home from war, Reed continued, the mission does not always leave him. A breeze moved across the bleachers. Somewhere near the field, a dog barked once from behind a holding gate. Reed turned toward the far side of the arena. And sometimes, despite every tool we have, a dog remains trapped in a state no handler can safely reach. Ethan's fork lowered to the tray. Luis saw it. What is it? Ethan did not answer. The gate opened, and the morning changed. Two handlers entered first. Both wore padded sleeves, reinforced gloves, and cautious expressions they tried to hide behind professionalism. Then Rex came into view. The Belgian Malinois moved low to the ground, but not with fear. His body was tight, controlled, explosive. A basket muzzle covered his jaws. Two leashes were clipped to his harness, one held by each handler, and even then both men had to brace their legs to keep him from surging forward. The crowd grew still. Rex's ears flicked rapidly, left, right, behind, forward. He was reading the world faster than anyone around him could understand. His paws struck the dirt in short, hard steps. His shoulders rippled under his coat. A scar ran along one side of his neck, partly hidden by the harness. Another mark crossed the bridge of his nose, where fur had never grown back evenly. To the audience, he looked dangerous. To Ethan, he looked exhausted. Reed stepped down from the platform and approached the edge of the field, careful not to come too close. "This is Rex," he said. Rex turned sharply at the sound of his name, then swung his head toward the bleachers, scanning faces as if searching for someone missing from formation. He is 4 years old, Belgian Malinois, former military working dog attached to a joint operations unit overseas. The handlers stopped near the center of the arena. Rex did not sit, he did not settle. He stood with his weight forward, chest pumping, legs ready. 8 months ago, Rex was removed from a combat environment after his team was hit during a mission outside Kandahar province. A few veterans lowered their eyes. Ethan's fingers curled around the edge of his tray. Reed continued. Since arriving stateside, he has shown severe reactivity toward handlers, sudden movement, direct approach in closed spaces, and command pressure. Rex snapped his head toward one of the handlers as the man shifted his foot. The handler froze. The dog did not attack. Not yet, but the message was clear. Do not move wrong. We began with standard decompression and medical evaluation, Reed said. No major physical condition was found that would explain the behavior. He lifted a folder from a nearby table. After that, we attempted positive reinforcement retraining, controlled evuction handler rotation, environmental adjustment, anti-anxiety medication, and trauma-informed desensitization exercises. His voice remained professional, but frustration lived beneath it. Every protocol produced the same result. Temporary compliance followed by sudden escalation. One of the handlers tried to guide Rex a step to the left. Rex exploded. He hit the end of both leashes with such force that one handler nearly lost his footing. The muzzle slammed against the padded sleeve on the second handler's arm. The man staggered back, boots scraping dirt, while the first handler shouted a command. The crowd recoiled. A child began to cry. Reed raised one hand toward the audience. Please remain seated. Rex twisted, snarling through the muzzle. Not at the crowd, not even directly at the handlers, but at the space between them. At movement, at pressure. At the shape of threat his mind had learned too well. The handlers regained control, breathing hard. Ethan had not moved. His tray sat untouched on his lap. Luis leaned closer. That dog's going to hurt somebody. Ethan's answer was barely audible. He's trying not to. Luis looked at him. What? Ethan kept watching Rex. The dog's ears were telling a different story than his body. Most people saw the lunging. Ethan saw the pauses before it. Rex was not throwing himself at random targets. He was reacting to specific angles, direct approaches, hands crossing centerline, sudden shifts in weight, boots moving too close to his blind side. He was not fighting the men. He was predicting them. There was a difference. Reed faced the crowd, again. This is why Rex has been classified as unsafe for reassignment. 3 trained handlers have been injured. One can no longer fully close his hand. A quiet heaviness passed through the bleachers. Military working dogs are partners, Reed said, and for the first time his voice softened. No one here takes this lightly, but partnership requires safety. If a dog cannot be handled without severe risk, we must consider the possibility the continued intervention is causing more suffering, not less. The words were careful, responsible, maybe even true from where Reed stood. But Ethan heard something else beneath them. We do not know how to reach him, so we have decided he is gone. Rex paced in a tight half circle, pulling against the restraints. His eyes kept going back to the far tree line beyond the arena. Not the crowd, not Reed, not the cameras. The horizon. Ethan knew that stare. He had seen it in bathroom mirrors at bus stations, in dark storefront windows after midnight, in the reflection of puddles beneath bridges. A man could come home and still keep watch over a road in another country. A dog could do the same. Reed signaled to one of the handlers. We'll demonstrate the controlled approach test. A padded decoy stepped into the field from the side gate. He moved slowly, both hands visible, following every safety instruction. The crowd could tell this was meant to be controlled, predictable, clinical. Rex did not care. The moment the decoy came from a forward angle, Rex lowered his head, his body shifted, weight forward, hind legs coiled, ears locked. Ethan whispered, don't. The decoy took one more step. Rex launched. Both handlers were ready this time, but barely. The dog struck the end of the restraint like a live wire snapping tight. The sound that came from him was not simple rage. It was urgency, warning, a command no one in the arena understood. The decoy backed away. Rex stopped fighting the leash almost immediately. That was what confirmed it. Ethan's breath caught. He was not attacking because he wanted to hurt someone. He was stopping in advance. In his mind, the perimeter had been breached. The mission was still active. The unit was still in danger, and no one had relieved him. Reed's voice came through the microphone again. As you can see, the reaction is immediate and disproportionate. We cannot safely place him with a new handler, a family, or a rehabilitation facility outside military control. Ethan looked at Rex's paws. The claws were dug into the dirt, not retreating, holding ground, protecting space. Then Rex turned his head again toward the horizon, and something inside Ethan went cold. He remembered waking in alleys with his back against brick walls, because open space made sleep impossible. He remembered leaving shelters when someone stood too close behind him in line. He remembered gripping the whistle in his pocket when footsteps approached under the bridge. People called it instability when they did not know the story. They called it aggression when they were afraid of the symptoms. But sometimes the body was only repeating the last command it had ever trusted. Stay alert. Hold the line. Keep them alive. Ethan swallowed hard. The crowd saw a dangerous dog. Reed saw a failed case. The handler saw risk. But Ethan saw a soldier who had never been told the war was over. Rex suddenly went still. For one brief second, his eyes swept across the bleachers. They passed over families, cameras, uniforms, children, flags. Then they stopped near Ethan. Not recognition, not yet, but awareness. Two broken things had noticed each other across the field. And Ethan knew, with a certainty that frightened him, that if no one spoke the right language soon, Rex would die misunderstood. Ethan did not remember deciding to stand. One moment he was sitting in the bleachers with a cold tray of food on his lap, watching Rex fight a war no one else could see. The next moment the tray slid from his knees and hit the concrete beneath the bench. Luis turned sharply. Ethan? But Ethan was already on his feet. For 4 years he had trained himself not to interfere, not to raise his voice, not to step into rooms where people might ask who he used to be. Shame had made him small. Guilt had taught him to stay invisible. But something about Rex broke through that silence. Not because the dog was dangerous, because the dog was being misunderstood in a way Ethan understood too well. Reed was still speaking into the microphone, explaining risk assessments and final recommendations when Ethan moved down the bleacher steps. A few people glanced at him. A mother pulled her child's knees aside so he could pass. Ethan's boots scraped against the metal steps, one sole bending slightly where the duct tape had loosened overnight. Luis stood behind him. Ethan, hold on. Ethan did not stop. At the bottom of the bleachers, he crossed the gravel toward the low barrier that separated the audience from the training field. A young corporal noticed him first. Sir, the corporal called, stepping into his path. You can't go past this point. Ethan kept his eyes on Rex. The dog had gone still again, chest rising and falling too fast, ears angled toward the decoy near the side gate. Sir, the corporal repeated, louder this time. This is a restricted area. Ethan stopped just short of him. Up close, the corporal saw what everyone else saw first. Torn jacket, dirty hands, hollow cheeks. A man who looked like he had slept outside for too many nights and eaten too few meals. I need to get to the dog, Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made the corporal hesitate. That's not happening. Behind them, Reed turned away from the crowd and noticed the interruption. What's going on over there? The corporal placed one hand lightly against Ethan's chest, not pushing yet, just warning. Sir, step back. Ethan finally looked at him. Not angry. Not wild. Just tired in a way that made the young Marine uncomfortable. If you keep testing him from the front, Ethan said, someone else is going to get hurt. The corporal blinked. Reed strode toward them, microphone lowered at his side. Who are you? Ethan's eyes moved back to Rex. I can help. Reed stared at him for half a second, then let out a short breath through his nose. This is not a public participation demonstration. I know. This is a high-risk military K-9 with a documented attack history. I know. Reed looked him over. The patched boots, the unshaven face, the backpack strap gripped in one hand like a lifeline. You know? Reed repeated. You don't look like you know anything about what's happening here. Luis reached the fence behind Ethan, breathing hard. Careful, he said to Reed. That man knows more about working dogs than half this base. Reed ignored him. Sir, I'm going to ask you one time. Return to your seat. Ethan's voice did not rise. You're calling it aggression because it's easier than admitting you don't understand the pattern. That reached Reed. His expression changed, not softened. What did you say? Ethan pointed toward Rex, but kept his hand low, slow, careful. He doesn't attack until someone approaches straight on. He isn't chasing. He's stopping movement. Watch his feet. Watch his ears before he lunges. He's holding a line. The corporal looked toward Rex despite both. Reed stepped closer. You read that from the bleachers? Ethan did not answer. Reed's jaw tightened. I don't know what you were told, but this dog has been evaluated by veterinarians, behavior specialists, military trainers, and medical consultants, and none of them gave him the command he's waiting for. Silence opened between them. The crowd had noticed now. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. A few phones lifted. Reed lowered his voice. You have experience with military working dogs? Ethan looked at the dirt. I did. That's not an answer. Marine Corps K9 handler. When? Ethan's mouth tightened. Long enough ago. Reed's eyes narrowed. That's convenient. Lewis gripped the fence with both hands. His call sign was Ghost. The words cut through the field. A few older veterans in the bleachers lifted their heads. Luis raised his voice. Ethan Walker, call sign Ghost. Check the records. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. He had not wanted the name spoken here. Not in daylight, not in front of uniforms, not where it could become real again. Reed looked from Luis to Ethan. Ghost? The radio on Reed's shoulder crackled. A female voice came through, sharp and controlled. Master Sergeant Reed, report your situation. Reed pressed the radio. Colonel Shaw, we have an unauthorized veteran attempting to enter the training field. Claims prior K9 experience. Name Ethan Walker. Call sign Ghost. For several seconds, there was only static. Then the voice returned, lower this time. Repeat that call sign. Reed's posture changed. Ghost Mom. Another pause. Ethan kept his eyes on Rex. The dog was watching him now. Not fully. Not with trust, but with attention. That was enough to make Ethan's chest tighten. The radio crackled again. Stand by. Reed stared at the radio, then at Ethan, as if the torn jacket had suddenly become harder to understand. From the command platform overlooking the field, movement stirred behind the glass. A figure in uniform stepped closer to the window. Colonel Rebecca Shaw had heard that call sign only in reports. The kind of reports passed between commanders when every normal solution had failed. Ghost had been the handler brought in when a dog would not bond, would not obey, would not come back from whatever the mission had done to it. And then years ago he had vanished. Reed's radio came alive again. Let him try. Reed's face tightened. Mom, with respect, this dog has already injured 3 handlers. If this civilian gets hurt, we are responsible. He is not just a civilian, Shaw replied. Reed glanced at Ethan again. The field seemed to hold its breath. Clear the immediate area, Shaw ordered. Keep medical on standby. Do not interfere unless I give the order. Reed did not like it. Every line in his face said so. But he was still a Marine. He stepped back. The corporal lowered his hand from Ethan's chest. Luis looked at Ethan through the fence. You sure? Ethan looked older than he had a moment before. No. Then he climbed over the barrier and walked onto the field. Rex's head turned fully toward him. The handlers tightened both leashes. Reed spoke sharply. Do not approach head-on. Ethan did not look back. I wasn't going to. And for the first time that morning, Rex stopped scanning the horizon and watched only him. Ethan moved slowly, not toward Rex's face, but in a curved path across the dirt. No direct line, no challenge, no pressure. Every step was small enough to be refused. The handler stood frozen, waiting for Rex to explode again. But Rex did not lunge. His ears followed Ethan's movement. His eyes narrowed. His body remained tight, but something in him had shifted from reaction to calculation. Ethan stopped several yards away. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he lowered himself to one knee. Dust pressed into the torn fabric of his pants. The crowd murmured. Reed took one step forward, then stopped when Shaw's voice came over the radio. Let him work. Ethan kept his shoulders angled away from Rex. He did not reach out. He did not call the dog's name. He simply waited. That was the first lesson most people forgot. A traumatized animal did not need a louder command. It needed room to decide that the next moment was safe. Rex's breathing remained fast. Ethan reached slowly into the front pocket of his jacket. One handler flinched. Rex's ears snapped forward. Ethan froze. He waited until the dog's body eased by the smallest measure. Then he continued. From his pocket, he drew a worn leather collar. The stitching had faded. The edges were cracked. A small brass nameplate caught the sun. Shadow. Ethan held it low. Not as bait, not as a trick, but as proof. His hand trembled once. He steadied it. This belonged to my partner, he said softly. No one in the crowd could hear him clearly. Rex could. Or maybe Rex heard the tone, the weight behind it, the absence of threat. Ethan placed the collar on the dirt between them. Then he reached into his backpack and removed the silver whistle. Reed noticed it immediately. What is that? Ethan did not answer. He lifted the whistle to his lips. When he blew, no audible sound crossed the field. The crowd heard nothing, but Rex's entire body changed. His ears rose straight up. His head tilted slightly. His breathing caught. The handlers looked at each other. Ethan blew again, shorter this time, then lowered the whistle. Rex took one step forward. The handlers tightened the leashes out of instinct. Ethan raised one hand, palm down. Don't pull him. Reed almost objected. Then he saw Rex stop on his own. Ethan's voice shifted. Not louder. More precise, he spoke in Dari, the words rusty but controlled. Aram, Nazdik Naya. Calm. Do not at eyes widened. A sound moved through the crowd, soft and confused. Ethan continued, adding a second phrase, one that did not belong in any standard training manual. Route Amber, Gate 3, hold until clear. Reed's face changed. Those were not pet commands, not obedience commands. They were mission language. Fragments from a specific deployment system used by joint teams years earlier, when handlers had adapted local words and operational codes so dogs could work around foreign contractors without alerting everyone nearby. Rex began to shake. Not with rage. With recognition, his tail lowered, but it was no longer tucked in fear. His weight shifted backward for the first time all morning. Ethan's throat tightened. He knew that look. The mind trying to cross a bridge between then and now, between the battlefield and the field beneath his paws, between the last order and the first safe silence. Ethan leaned forward slightly, still on one knee, still not reaching. You were waiting for the right voice, he whispered. Rex stared at him. The dog's body trembled so hard the harness straps shook. Ethan pointed gently toward the collar on the dirt. My partner waited too. His voice nearly failed, but he kept going. You're not broken, soldier. You're not bad. You're not some lost cause because people got scared of what they didn't understand. Rex's ears softened. Ethan swallowed. You were still doing the job. You were still guarding the line. Nobody told you the mission ended. The handlers stood motionless. Reed had forgotten the microphone in his hand. The field was silent enough now that even the flags above the bleachers could be heard snapping in the wind. Ethan lifted the whistle once more and gave one short silent note. Then he spoke the final words, clear, certain, like a door opening. Ghost clear. Stand down. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Rex stared at him. Every person in the arena waited for the lunge, the strike, the scream. Instead, Rex's front legs bent. His body lowered slowly toward the dirt. One handler whispered something under his breath. The other loosened his grip without realizing it. Rex crawled forward, not as a defeated animal, but as a soldier finally relieved from duty. He reached the old collar first, sniffed it, then moved past it. Ethan did not touch him until Rex made the choice himself. The Belgian Malinois pressed his muzzled face against Ethan's knee. A broken sound came from his throat. Not a growl, not a bark, something smaller, something tired. Ethan placed one hand gently on the side of Rex's neck. The dog leaned into it with his full weight. Across the bleachers, no one spoke. A little girl who had been crying wiped her face and stared. Luis gripped the fence with both hands, his eyes wet. Reed stood in the center of the field, pale and still. Rex closed his eyes. For the first time since anyone at Fort Bragg had known him, he was not pulling, not scanning, not fighting invisible enemies. He was resting. And Ethan, who had not allowed himself to be needed in 4 years, bowed his head over the dog and whispered something only Rex could hear. Good boy. You made it home. 200 yards from the training field, Colonel Rebecca Shaw stood inside the observation room, with one hand pressed against the edge of her desk. On the live monitor, Rex was lying against Ethan Walker's knees. No restraints pulled tight. No handlers shouting commands. No panic. Just a dog breathing like he had finally been allowed to come back from somewhere far away. Shaw turned from the screen to her aide. Pull every file we have on Ethan Walker. The young lieutenant was already typing. Mom, active records? All of them. Service history, medical discharge, deployment logs, K9 program notes. Anything connected to the call sign Ghost. The lieutenant's fingers slowed. You know him? Shaw did not answer right away. She remembered the call sign the way some officers remembered certain coordinates. Ghost had appeared in after-action reports like a last resort. When a K9 team broke down, when a handler lost control, when a dog refused every known method, someone would write the same recommendation. Send Walker. Within seconds, the first file opened on the screen. A younger Ethan appeared in the photo. Clean uniform, straight posture, clear eyes. A black German shepherd sat beside him, calm and alert. Under the image were the words, Staff Sergeant Ethan Walker, Marine Corps Military Working Dog Handler, call sign, Ghost, specialty, high-risk K9 recovery, handler correction, field rehabilitation. Shaw read silently as the file filled the screen. 3 combat deployments, multiple joint operations, 14 K9 partnerships supervised, 41 damaged or unstable working dogs returned to service under his evaluation. 0 documented mission failures as lead handler. Commendations for courage under fire. Formal praise from commanders who rarely praised anyone. One note written by an officer, Shaw, stopped her. Walker does not overpower dogs. He reads them. He identifies the command the animal still trusts and builds from there. His work should be studied, not merely used. Shaw looked back through the window. On the field, Ethan was still kneeling beside Rex, one hand resting against the dog's neck, as if he feared sudden movement might break the moment. The lieutenant scrolled lower. Then the records changed. The clean language of success gave way to reports, medical forms, restricted summaries, and psychiatric recommendations. Shaw's face hardened. Helmond, she said quietly. The lieutenant glanced at her. Mom, open the incident file. The room seemed to shrink as the report loaded. Operation Iron Lantern, Helmond, a compound search after an intercepted weapons transfer. Ethan Walker and Shadow assigned to the lead detection team. Shaw read the summary, though she already understood where it was going. Shadow had alerted outside the eastern entrance of a mud-walled compound. Full freeze, nose fixed low, tail locked, body stiff. The kind of alert a trained handler never ignored. But the unit was under pressure. The timeline was tight. Command believed insurgents were escaping through the rear corridor. A captain on radio ordered the team forward. Walker objected once, then again. The order was repeated. Proceed. According to the report, Walker moved forward with the unit. Seconds later, the device detonated. The blast tore through the entrance and collapsed part of the wall. 2 Marines died before evacuation could reach them. 3 others were wounded. Shadow was hit shielding Walker from the worst of the blast. The dog stayed alive long enough to crawl back to his handler. Witness statements said Walker kept one hand on Shadow's chest until the dog stopped breathing. After that, something in him changed. He completed the extraction. He helped move the wounded. He gave a full report. He even corrected the incident map when another Marine marked the wrong approach route. But those who saw him afterward said his voice sounded empty, as if some essential part of him had remained in the dust with Shadow. Shaw closed the file for a moment. Not because she lacked discipline, because she had seen what guilt could do to good people. It did not always destroy them loudly. Sometimes it convinced them they no longer deserved to stand in clean rooms, sleep in safe beds, or be thanked for anything they had done right. On the field, Master Sergeant Reed approached Ethan carefully. Rex lifted his head at once. Ethan touched the dog's shoulder with 2 fingers. Rex settled. That small motion told Shaw more than any file could. She picked up her cap and walked out of the observation room. By the time she reached the field, the crowd was still quiet. The kind of quiet that came after. People witnessed something they did not yet know how to explain. Reed stood several feet away from Ethan, his confidence cracked but not gone. How did you know? He asked. Ethan did not look up immediately. Know what? That he wasn't just attacking. Ethan looked at Rex, because he stopped when the threat stopped. Reed frowned. The threat? To him, yes. Reed followed Ethan's gaze toward the side gate where the decoy had entered. Ethan continued, voice low but steady. You kept approaching him like a disobedient dog. He was reading everyone like a combatant. Direct movement, forward angle, hands too high, too much pressure. Every test confirmed the thing he was already afraid of. Reed absorbed that without answering. Ethan scratched gently beneath the edge of Rex's harness. He wasn't refusing obedience. He was obeying the last mission he understood. Colonel Shaw stepped into the circle. The handlers straightened. Reed turned. Mom. Shaw ignored the formal greeting and looked at Ethan. Staff Sergeant Walker. Ethan's shoulders stiffened at the rank. I'm not that anymore. You earned it. I lost it. Shaw studied him. No, you walked away from it. The words landed harder than she intended, but Ethan did not argue. Rex pressed closer to his leg. Shaw softened her voice. I read Helmand. Ethan's face changed. Not much. Just enough. The muscles around his mouth tightened. His eyes moved away from hers and fixed somewhere beyond the field. That report doesn't tell you everything, he said. Reports never do. I knew Shadow was right. The field around them seemed to disappear for him. He froze, full alert. I felt it through the leash before I even saw it. I knew there was something there. Shaw said nothing. I let the radio outrank the dog. His hand closed around Rex's harness. 2 men died. Shadow died, and I kept breathing. Reed looked down. The crowd could not hear every word, but they could feel the shape of the conversation. Shaw took 1 step closer. You were under orders. Ethan's laugh was short and joyless. That's what people say when they want guilt to sound procedural. It matters, not to the dead. A long silence followed. Then Ethan looked at Rex. This is what people don't understand. The body remembers the moment it failed. It keeps returning to it. It keeps trying to redo it, repair it, stop it from happening again. He glanced toward Reed. Dogs do it too, especially working dogs. They are trained to hold patterns under pressure. If the last clear pattern was danger, they keep living inside it. Reed's face had changed fully now, no defensiveness, only attention. So Rex is still on mission? Yes. And every time we tested him, you became part of the threat picture. Reed looked at the handlers, then back at Rex. We thought we were evaluating him. You were, Ethan said, but he was evaluating you too. That sentence moved through the people close enough to hear it. It was simple, educational, and painful, because it revealed the mistake without humiliating anyone. Shaw looked at Rex, calm at Ethan's side, then at the old collar lying in the dirt. Can he recover? Ethan took a long breath. He can learn he's not there anymore. That wasn't my question. Ethan finally met her eyes. Yes, but not by force, not by flooding him until he breaks. He needs a handler who understands that trust is not control. It is permission given slowly. Reed looked down at the leash in his hand. For the first time that morning, it seemed heavier than before. Colonel Shaw asked everyone to clear the immediate field except Reed, the medical team, Luis, and the 2 handlers who still held Rex's loosened leashes. The crowd remained in the bleachers, whispering softly, unwilling to leave before understanding what they had just witnessed. Ethan stood slowly. His knees protested. Rex rose with him. The dog did not pull toward the gate. He did not snap at the handlers. He simply stayed close to Ethan's left side, as though the position had always belonged to him. Shaw noticed that too. Mr. Walker, she said, I'm going to make this plain. Ethan's expression tightened. People in uniform rarely made things plain unless they were about to make them permanent. We need you. He looked at her, uncertain if he had heard correctly. Shaw continued. Our Canine Rehabilitation Unit has resources, facilities, and trained personnel. But today proved we are missing something essential. Reed lowered his eyes but did not object. You saw in 20 minutes what we missed in 8 months, Shaw said. Not because you had better equipment. Because you understood the animal in front of you. Ethan looked away. I got lucky, no. Shaw's voice became firmer. Luck does not read posture. Luck does not know deployment commands from 10 years ago. Luck does not bring a dog like Rex down without a fight. She handed her tablet to Reed, then faced Ethan fully. I want to bring you in as a civilian rehabilitation specialist. You would work with our hardest canine cases, train handlers, review old deployment histories, and help us build better transition protocols. Ethan said nothing. Housing would be provided on base during the initial contract period. Medical care would be coordinated. Full access to veteran support services, including trauma counseling, if you choose to use it. Lewis, standing near the fence, lifted both hands. That sounds like a yes to me. Ethan did not smile. Rex leaned lightly against his leg. That small pressure seemed to make the offer harder, not easier. I can't do that, Ethan said. Luis's face fell. Reed looked up. Shaw did not move. Why? Ethan stared at the dirt where Shadow's collar still lay. Because people like me don't belong back inside the gate. Shaw waited. I had one rule, he said. Trust the dog. That was everything. That was the foundation. I taught it to handlers. I repeated it until they got sick of hearing it. His voice roughened. And when it mattered most, I didn't follow it. No one interrupted. I don't get to stand in front of young handlers and tell them how to do this. I don't get to wear clean clothes and collect a check because I calmed one dog in front of an audience. Lewis stepped forward. Ethan, no. The word came sharper than expected. Rex's ears flicked. Ethan immediately lowered his hand to calm him. I know what happens when I'm wrong, Ethan said more quietly. Other people pay for it. Shaw's answer came without hesitation. And I know what happens when people with your experience disappear. Dogs die misunderstood. Handlers get hurt. Veterans sleep under bridges believing the worst day of their life is the only day that defines them. Ethan looked at her then. Shaw held his gaze. I am not offering you a reward. I am offering you responsibility. That reached him. She continued. You do not erase the past by suffering forever. You honor the people you lost by preventing the same mistakes from being repeated. Ethan's throat moved. For a moment, he looked less like a legend and more like a man who had been tired for too long. What happens to Rex? Shaw looked at the dog. He will not be euthanized. The air seemed to leave Ethan's body. His status will be changed pending further evaluation. If you accept the position, Rex will be assigned under your care for rehabilitation and observation. Rex's head turned when he heard his name. Ethan looked down at him. The dog looked back with a trust so new it almost hurt to see. Then Ethan said, I have one condition. Shaw's eyebrows lifted slightly. Say it. I don't just want to work with dogs. Louis slowly lowered his hands. Ethan turned toward the bleachers, where veterans still sat watching in silence. There are men and women outside these gates who know exactly what it feels like to be written off. Some of them were handlers. Some were medics. Some were infantry. Some never touched a leash in their lives, but they understand fear, silence, guilt, and bad nights better than most professionals ever will. Reed listened closely. Ethan continued. Build a program for them. Shaw's face remained unreadable. Explain, pair homeless veterans with military canines and rescue dogs that have been labeled too difficult, too reactive, or too damaged. Train the veterans as handlers. Give the dog structure. Give the veterans responsibility. Not charity, not pity, work. Lewis looked at Ethan as if seeing him return piece by piece. Ethan's voice grew steadier. You want education? Teach handlers to read trauma before they punish behavior. Teach veterans that their instincts can still serve a purpose. Teach the public that broken does not mean dangerous by default. He looked back at Rex. Some dogs don't need to be discarded. Some veterans don't need to be managed like problems. Sometimes they need each other. Shaw said nothing for several seconds. The idea was risky, expensive, complicated, full of paperwork, liability, oversight, training standards, medical screening, and military resistance. It was also the first thing all morning that felt bigger than one saved dog. Reed cleared his throat. Mom. Shaw looked at him. I misread Rex, he said, badly. If Walker is willing to teach this, I think we should listen. Lewis pointed at Reed. I like him better now. For the first time, a faint smile touched Shaw's mouth. Then she extended her hand to Ethan. We start small, pilot program, 5 veterans. 5 dogs, full supervision. If it works, we expand. Ethan looked at her hand, then at Luis, then at Rex. For 4 years, he had believed the world was safer without needing him. Now a dog who had nearly been given up on was leaning against his leg, waiting. Ethan picked up Shadow's collar from the dirt and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he took Shaw's hand. The bleachers erupted. Not all at once. It began with Luis clapping. One veteran, then another. Soon the sound rolled across the field, rising louder than the announcements, louder than the morning traffic beyond the base, louder than the shame Ethan had carried for years. Rex did not bark. He simply stood beside him, steady, alert, Home. 3 months after the demonstration, a weathered barracks building on the far edge of Fort Bragg reopened under a new name. The sign above the entrance read, Veteran and Canine Recovery Initiative. The lettering was simple. The idea behind it was not. Inside, 5 veterans worked with 5 dogs that other programs had nearly written off. Some animals had been retired from military service. Others had come from shelters after repeated behavioral failures. Each dog carried a history of fear, hypervigilance, or mistrust. Each veteran carried wounds no X-ray could fully reveal. The purpose of the program was straightforward. Not rescue, not charity. Responsibility. The educational model Ethan developed was built around one principle. Behavior is information. Before anyone corrected a dog, they learned to ask what the animal was trying to communicate. The same question applied to people. Colonel Shaw called it rehabilitation. Ethan called it translation. Luis Mendoza was assigned a broad-chested German shepherd named Duke. Duke had been retired after repeatedly barking and lunging whenever anyone approached him from behind. Trainers initially described him as unstable. Ethan saw something else. The dog startled when surprised. So did Luis. Years as a medic had left Luis unable to sleep with his back to a doorway. He joked often, but he flinched when footsteps came too fast. The two understood each other almost immediately. Luis began working with Duke every morning before sunrise. He spoke softly, moved slowly, and let the dog choose when to close the distance. Within 6 weeks, Duke no longer spun in panic when touched unexpectedly. Luis changed too. He shaved, replaced his worn coat with clean clothes, started sleeping indoors without waking every hour. One afternoon, while Duke rested with his head on Luis's leashed boot, the older man looked at Ethan and said, "Turns out some of us only needed someone to hand us a leash." Nora Bennett joined the program during the second month. She was a former Army logistics specialist who had spent nearly 2 years moving between shelters after leaving an abusive relationship. Her partner was Daisy, a yellow Labrador mix rescued from a neglect case. Daisy cowered whenever voices rose and retreated to corners when anyone reached toward her too quickly. Nora never forced contact. She sat on the floor and read aloud from library books while Daisy watched from a distance. Day after day, the space between them narrowed. The first time Daisy climbed into Nora's lap, both of them trembled. Healing, Ethan taught, rarely looked dramatic. More often, it appeared as one frightened being deciding to stay. Master Sergeant Reed became the program's most attentive student. At first, he arrived with notebooks and questions, eager to understand what he had missed with Rex. Over time, his questions changed. Instead of asking how to stop unwanted behavior, he asked what the dog might be protecting. Instead of insisting on immediate compliance, he learned to reward signs of trust. During one training session, Reed watched Duke hesitate near a doorway and quietly stepped aside rather than urging him forward. Afterward, he told Ethan, "I used to think authority meant taking control. Now I think it begins with paying attention." At night, when the base grew quiet, Ethan still had difficult hours. Some memories remained sharp: the blast in Helmand, Shadow's final breath, the years he spent believing his life had ended there. But now Rex slept on a mat beside his bed. When Ethan woke suddenly, breathing hard, Rex would rise without a sound and rest his head across Ethan's chest. Warm, steady, present. The dog asked for nothing. He simply stayed until Ethan's heartbeat slowed. Then both of them went back to sleep. 1 year after Rex's final evaluation, the same training field at Fort Bragg was filled again. This time, no one had gathered to witness a possible euthanasia. They had come to celebrate. 15 veterans stood in formation beside 15 dogs. Some had completed therapy certification. Others were preparing for search and rescue work, facility support, or advanced obedience training. Families filled the bleachers. Children waved flags. Colonel Shaw stepped to the podium and looked across the field. This program began because one man refused to accept that a difficult dog and a struggling veteran were problems to be managed, she said. He reminded us that understanding can accomplish what force never will. Applause rolled across the grounds. Ethan stood off to the side, uncomfortable with public attention as always. Rex sat beside him, older now, calm and watchful. After the ceremony, while graduates hugged their families and posed for photographs, a young soldier approached. She could not have been more than 23. Her uniform was neatly pressed, but her eyes were red from lack of sleep. At the end of her leash stood a lean, sable German shepherd. The dog was alert, rigid, and distant. "Mr. Walker," she said. "This is Blitz." Her voice shook. "He belonged to my brother. He was killed in Syria last winter. Since then, Blitz hasn't trusted anyone. They said he might be too difficult to keep." Ethan knelt slowly. Blitz watched him, uncertain but attentive, the same haunted look, the same unfinished mission. The young soldier's grip tightened on the leash. "Can you help him?" Ethan glanced at Rex, then at the dog in front of him. He had heard that question before, in many different forms. "Can this be repaired? Does this life still matter? Is it too late?" Ethan extended his hand, palm low and open. Then he looked up and said the words that had become the foundation of everything built over the past year. "Yes." His voice was quiet but certain. "We can help him." Trauma is often misunderstood because it rarely looks noble from the outside. It can resemble anger, withdrawal, defensiveness, or fear. Yet beneath those reactions is often a nervous system still trying to protect what it once loved. Purpose restores dignity by giving pain a direction. Empathy heals because it asks what happened before deciding what is wrong. And broken does not mean useless. Sometimes the very scars that seem to disqualify a person become the reason they are uniquely able to guide someone else home.